Welcome to another episode on the Scouse Oracle. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you haven't yet hit that subscribe button, please can you hit that subscribe button? It truly helps me a lot. Today I do want to be deep diving into the prison data overhaul. Now if you've seen it, I'm pretty sure that you will have on the mainstream media, how they're reporting on these prisoners escaping and there's been mistakes. And I went digging because when something's in the mainstream media, I always want to know what's going on behind the scenes. What are they not saying? So the Ministry of Justice have just put out that they're looking to do a 40 to 60 million pound rebuild of the NOMIS. So let's get into it. This will be sharing a lot of information, so please bear with me. And I always want to stick to factual information, but we will cover a lot. So the NOMIS, it's the National Offender Management Information System. It's the main database used by the Ministry of Justice and the HM Prison and Probation Service to track every prisoner and probation case in England and in Wales. It records who's in custody, where they're being held, the sentence details, the parole status and transfers. And if that data is wrong, someone can be released early, held too long, or lost in the system. And at the moment, we're having a big push in the mainstream media about something that needs to be done. And I believe what they're proposing was already paid for 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, they paid hundreds of millions to build a new prison database. Now they're putting out a £60 million contract to modernise it again. Same goal, same system, same mistake. And this government's new project is the digital transformation of offender management systems. So it sounds like a new system, but it literally says the modernisation of the NOMIS and then the integration with national justice data platforms. So that's the exact wording that they used back in 2003. So back in 2003, there wasn't one national prison database. Each prison ran its own local system for inmate records, visits and sentencing, usually maintained by small in-house IT teams or local contractors. And we had the regional probation officers also using their own databases, and the court was separate, and that meant that the system was fragmented, but it was functional because it allowed staff to manage records independently. And the big thing here for me personally is when you've got people being able to manage things independently with an oversight of regional, it kind of keeps it more within a community. Even though I know we're talking about prisoners here, but the oversight and the transparency, it's kind of more close-knit. And that's my opinion. So the factual part of it is, at the time, we had the government, the Labour, and we had Tony Blair as Prime Minister, 1997 to 2007, Home Secretary Jack Straw, followed by David Blunkett. So by the early 2000s, the Home Office wanted to modernise it. Officials complained that disconnected systems and paper files slowed prisoner transfers and created duplicate records, so they wanted a single joined-up offender record linking prisoners, probation and court. So the goal was efficiency, consistency and transparency. And that was under Blair's modernising government agenda, 1999, promoting centralised digital systems across all departments. So bear this in mind. So by 2003 and to 2009, we had the outsourcing shift. So bearing in mind, if these mistakes are coming up, we could have kept it within local departments. We could have modernised it within the system. We could have kept it and modernised it, but the outsourcing shift. So instead of improving existing systems that we were in control of, the Home Office launched a new national database project, which was called the NOMIS, which we have now, the National Offender Management Information System. So it hired a US company called Electronic Data Systems, EDS, to design it and deliver it. And them costs ballooned from, so they had a trajectory of costs of it costing 234 million. So bear this in mind of how much it could have cost to update the systems without outsourcing. It went up to £690 million to do this in the end. And the National Audit Office in 2009 found that the department had underestimated its complexity and become dependent on contractors. So by 2009, officials decided to outsource it long term. That meant long-term maintenance fees instead of rebuilding it in-house. So the government then, it was Labour, the Home Secretary from 2003 to 2006 was Charles Clarke to John Reid. The first Justice Secretary after the MOJ creation was Jack Straw. So basically, before 2003, prisons kept their own data. It was messy, maybe, but it was ours. But after 2003, the government scrapped local systems to build one massive database through an American contractor, which ran at triple the cost and left the government dependent on private contractors. And these are the systems that we still use today. So before 2003, it was ours. It was run by Britain. And the takeover from the American run. So what we had was, it was bought by the US investment company Vista Equality Partners, and then transferring control of the prison databases to foreign ownership for the first time. So then in 2017, we had the Canadian takeover. So in 2017, N. Harris Computer Corporation, a division of Canadian holding company Constellation Software, acquired Advanced Public Sector Division, including the NOMIS. So from this point, so that means from this point, the UK's prison data infrastructure became Canadian owned. So we are still paying maintenance fees for that. So, and I will list it all as well in the description. We're paying roughly around £7 million a year to access our own data. So 2020, the full control was confirmed. The Ministry of Justice continued renewing the same supplier rather than bringing the development back in-house. So now, as it stands, the MOJ have awarded Harris again a new 21 million direct contract for this. So that's running for another 4 years. That's with the maintenance fees. Software, live service support, development and maintenance. So that's one part of it. The contract confirms that the intellectual property, so the code for all our data, belongs to the supplier. Meaning the government must pay to use its own system. So who's paying? The government for this data, our data. So the UK built its prison database in 2003. It outsourced it in 2009. It sold the support company by 2015. And by 2017, it was owned in Canada. And today, the Ministry of Justice pays to rent to access its own prison data. A system designed and funded by British taxpayers, but controlled overseas. So this hasn't all happened overnight. It's been a slow... It's what's happened back in 2003. Before then, everything was owned by us. We controlled it. It could have some issues, but we could have more transparency. If there was a data breach, we'd know the correct channels to follow. Now, we don't even own our own data. So, the Ministry of Defence, as I say, is preparing the digital transformation of offender management systems, the contract to rebuild or replace this system that we have. The database that tracks every prisoner and probation case in England and Wales. This project will modernise that system and link it with national justice data platforms based on government frameworks and supplier history. These are the companies which are most likely to bid for it. My understanding of this is they've already got this system in place and they're already paying for it. They're already tied into a contract because they're paying the maintenance to a Canadian company. So where's the benefit of this modernisation? Because it's not bringing it in-house to modernise it. It's not doing anything that it hasn't been doing for the past 20 years. So is this bringing in more suppliers with the infrastructure behind it, which connects to the national digital ID rollout? So the NEC Software Solutions UK Limited already supplies policing and offender management software and is a listed supplier on the blue light commercial live facial recognition framework, which in my previous post I've discussed and I've spoken about. If the NEC wins, the same company running facial recognition software could also run the new prison database, managing both sides of the surveillance equation. So can you kind of see where this infrastructure is going? If Capita Business Services Limited delivers electronic tagging, probation and court scheduling systems for the MOJ and provides identity verification and call centre services for other departments, Capita's footprint in both digital ID and justice data makes it a strong contender and a key connector between the systems. Sopra Steria Limited operates the UK Visa and Citizenship Application Service for the Home Office, handling biometric, enrolment and data integration projects, and also provides digital transformation services to the MOJ, specialising in linking legacy systems with new identity infrastructure. Then we've got CGI UK Limited, provides cloud hosting and cyber security for both MOJ and Home Office. While it's an unlikely lead, CGI could act as a partner for the rebuild infrastructure layer. Atos, Thames, Atos is a long-term supplier with the DWP, the Home Office and the MOJ. They're known for the identity access and analytics systems. So they may support integration and data migration across justice platforms. Thelms UK Limited provides secure ID and passport chip technology to the Home Office, so they could contribute to the biometric components. So the N. Harris Computer Corporation, Advanced UK, the Canadian firm, they currently run the NOMIS database under a renewed contract, so they're likely to rebid, possibly in partnership with a larger integrator. So if that happens prison data could move onto the same digital infrastructure used for policing and identity systems. So the government's rebuilding a database that tracks every prisoner in England and Wales. The same companies that run digital ID and facial recognition systems are the strongest candidates for this contract. Even if the data stays separate, the shared suppliers. So when there's no transparency, when there's no data protection impact assessment, when you've got the government piecing it bit by bit to all avoid accountability, then one can only start imagining what could happen in the future. And the way I see it, you'd always look into the contracts, you'd always follow the money. And this hasn't just happened overnight. Why were we unable to keep it in-house? Why didn't you want to keep it in-house? And the profits are huge. But who's paying the price for that? And who's gaining? And every time you are look in this direction, look at thy neighbour, we are stopping ourselves from looking where we should be looking. And hopefully this is what my channel provides, that further clarity into that, knowing deep down something's not quite sitting right, but not being able to put your finger on it. And of course I'm going to be submitting my freedom of information requests, but I wanted to get this information out here as soon as I could, because it's a lot of information and I do it in, I hope, bits. So I feel like my platforms are maybe a spider web all connecting to maybe the same thing. But I'll be submitting my freedom of information requests, but I also need to know first the best way to go about it in terms of what's already public, asking specific questions, because when submitting these requests, you need to be asking the questions in terms of when you're getting the response back, the silence or the dodge, it tells you everything. So I'll also update you on the freedom of information requests I'll be submitting, why I'll be submitting them, what questions I'm asking, and then what I'm hoping it'll uncover. And as always, thank you for your support. There's always good with the bad. It's the balance. I feel like if we can provide a little bit of balance, if we can have that transparency, independently, if you know where to look, you're not blindly following what you're told, then within having a bit of clarity, you can just have that bit more power. And that's what I hope that this has provided. I do know there's a lot of information. I'm trying to think whether I've covered everything. But maybe to summarise, I would say 20 years ago, they paid hundreds of millions to build a new prison database, and now they've put out a £60 million contract to modernise it again. So that's the plan. So I can't tell you the contracts in which, who's bidding for it, because at the moment it's the plan, but it's what I'm following. So I'm following this. So every time I've got an update, I'm bringing it to you. So it's got the same goal, the same system, the same mistake. This is a government's new project, the digital transformation of offender management. So back then, remember, they spent around 700 million outsourcing it to a US company, which it ran late, it went wrong, and then it was sold off to a Canadian firm. So now we're paying another £60, okay, I wish, another £60 million to fix the same system, one that we don't even own anymore. So we called it digital transformation back in 2003. Today we're calling it digital transformation in 2025. But the only thing that's transformed is who owns our data. We built it, we lost it, and now we're renting it back with interest. Thank you for following, And if you haven't, hit that subscribe button, because I'll be following this story and I'll be asking the right questions and I'll be bringing it all to you.